empathy is your ability to put yourself in other people's shoes
Yep.
and understand. And I think that was a very powerful secret weapon for me, particularly early on, trying to find a way to communicate to various stakeholders that have different agendas than you would have or I would have. And I think empathy is the one that really was the secret sauce for me because I could put myself in their shoes and then start to address or present my thoughts thinking about how they're hearing it or how they might uh, take it in some form or fashion. So, emotional intelligence for me, it's empathy, it's really understanding how that other person is working, and then it kind of just all falls into place from there. So I try to make it simple for myself, and I just think of the word empathy.
Many people want to be leaders. Fewer understand what it really means to lead people well. So what separates the two? Welcome to the Lead with Purpose podcast with your host, Merv Jersey. Each week, you'll hear honest conversations with leaders who have been in the trenches and have stories to tell. They'll share their practical wisdom to help cut through the noise and get to the heart of leadership. So let's get started.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Lead with Purpose. My guest today is a longtime friend. In fact, we were study buddies when we went through our MBA program together. Steve, I'll introduce you here in a second. He has spent, I think, pretty much his entire career in one of the toughest leadership arenas there is, and that is in sales and marketing. But because here's the truth that nobody tells young leaders. If you can't influence, if you can't communicate, if you can't build trust, if you can't create momentum, you're going to struggle as a leader no matter what your title is on your business card. So welcome, Steve. Welcome to Lead with Purpose. And how's it going over there in the great state of Hawaii?
Well, aloha, my brother Merv. Great to be with you. Great memories of our time as study buddies. And you reminded me that of all the 10 groups that had study groups in our class, we were the only ones that remained intact for the entire 27 months. That's a great thing to be proud of. And that may have shown some of your leadership because you were definitely the glue that kept us together. But I want to say hello to everybody out there. My name is Steve Wangler. I'm a 46-year veteran of the consumer packaged goods industry. So yes, I stayed in food pretty much my entire career, and it turned out very well for me. You know, I've had some highs and lows over those times. I've experienced a lot of different uh, working styles, leadership styles that I reported into. I hopefully looked for the good things and the bad things and learned from them. And I also crossed every single retail channel in the United States and in Canada. So that's grocery, natural, club. Club is like Costco, mass, which is like Walmart, C stores, et cetera, across a number of different food categories as well. Processed meats, soft drinks, cookies and crackers,
Wow.
beer, kombucha, and then finally ended up in salty snacks with the Good Crisp Company. I was able to retire successfully from there with an exit that we were able to get done last year. So it's a great time to be reflecting on some of the things that I've learned and also applying it to some of the very big activities that I've taken on now with Rotary Club of Honolulu.
Well, and what's interesting too is, people don't always associate sales with leadership, but I just want to go back to our MBA experience. I'm going to tell a little story on you here, Steve.
Uh-oh.
And by the way, we were all leaders. And I say that because I think one of the reasons we kept together for that entire program, the entire length of the program, was because we all had our expertise. And so we had Ken, who was, I think he was in charge of the nuclear waste disposal, one of the big sites. So he was our logistics guy. Kathy was a senior VP of a bank, so she was our finance person. I did project management, so I did a lot of the computer related stuff. Dale was in the military. We won't tell you anything he did, or they'll take this program off the air. And then we always said, and Steve was our big guy because he brought the beer.
It's true. I was working for the Coors Brewing Company at the time, and they were kind enough to sponsor my MBA. And I will tell you this, just as a side note, it's tougher to hand in your grades to your employer for reimbursement than it is to hand your grades to your parents.
That's true. But, you just mentioned the Good Crisp Company and the fact that you were in packaged good and salty snacks. Do you remember that one of our assignments in the marketing, you were, by the way, forget the beer part, you were our marketing and sales guy, our
Thank you.
guru at that point. And do you remember one of our projects was to deal with the Lay's salty snack company?
Yeah, and you reminded me that of the other day when we spoke again, and I went right back to it as soon as you said it. I could see the case in front of me, and I'm not sure that multi-billion dollar company would have listened to us, but I thought we had some really good ideas. Including things like before they had it, we thought of things like hot Cheetos and fiery Cheetos and a
Yeah.
lot of spices, and they just weren't hearing us for another 10 years. So
What can I say?
and here I
Well,
end up at the peak of my career in the salty snack business, competing with those guys.
yeah, exactly. Well, I think here's where I want to get started, and that is that sales. You just reminded me, handing in your grades to your employer. Sales
Mhm.
is one of those very few professions, I think, anyway, where the scoreboard is public every single month. You get managed, you get evaluated every month. What did that particular environment teach you about leadership and even personal accountability as a leader?
Well, first off, in terms of personal accountability, I started out on a route selling to uh, butcher shops and small grocery stores at Oscar Mayer in 1978 in Buffalo, New York.
Wow.
And, I was going out, calling in a phone in a booth, calling orders in, writing them down, no computers or anything like that. And I had a real accountability, even though I really didn't know one end of the cow from the other at that point in
Hey,
time.
I'm a
So
farm boy. I know.
yeah, see, it would have been helpful if we were friends then,
That's
and,
right.
I could have leaned on you more than I even did in MBA, but, I think at first off, it was an awakening. I didn't have a lot of street sense early on. I just gotten out of school, and, I was like, "Wow, they're watching everything you do,
Yeah.
and there is a score, so it's kinda like sports, that's fine, I'm good with that." But I can tell you that you what I learned is not to get too high and not to get too low. You're going to have some good months and then you're going to have some ones that are a little bit of a struggle. And as long as you learn literally from both sides of that, the successes you might have and also the challenges that you had, if you can take that in and then incorporate that to the next level or the next opportunity, I think that slowly but surely builds up your calluses, if you will. And I do this because I'm a guitar player, so there's lots of calluses here.
Yeah.
And, those calluses on your heart or on your head, are really important so that when to really get worried and when to just go, "Okay, well, I've got another month coming up. I'm gonna do even better, and I'm gonna address those things that were shortfalls for me." I would say the other thing is, as I moved along into sales management was, on one side, you want to empower your people to do that, and that also helps share the successes and
Mhm.
the challenges that you might have, and that really became something that was a hallmark item for me, in that we would share our successes, we would actually celebrate our successes,
Yeah.
and then we would find the learnings from the challenges that we had and move forward. And I found that to be a very powerful element to managing people because they responded well to the shared responsibility. I was never the guy that was like, okay, that's your fault.
Yeah.
It was always a shared responsibility and shared success. So
Well,
if we had success, we pointed out that to those individuals.
and if I took out the word sales from everything you just talked about and substitute the word leadership, it fits perfectly with everything we need to be able to do as leaders. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, and at the time, I don't know that there were a lot of great books on leadership. I was trying to learn from the people that I worked for and with, and
Mm,
even the people that were on my team. Everybody, to your point about our MBA study group, everybody had a certain skill set. And if we learned how to take advantage and leverage that and give that person the opportunity to succeed, it's really about creating the environment for others to succeed, not just yourself.
yeah.
And that's a much more powerful. I still call it the force multiplier.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, it's a much more powerful, impactful way to go to market.
Exactly. You had mentioned the Good Crisp company, and I think I had stumbled upon one of your LinkedIn posts, and I hadn't heard of the Good Crisp company, so I went straight to the local Whole Foods, and they were on sale that day, so I grabbed a bunch. So tell me, I mean, I understand it's an Australian company, but you built the US side of that basically from the ground up. You were the US infrastructure of that particular company. So what did that tell you about leading growth and about leadership when you're kind of it?
Yeah, well, the Good Chris Company was an idea out of Adelaide, Australia, from four snack guys down there, three guys more my age, and then the young Matt Perry, who was really the idea behind this. All us seasoned guys were more the the fuel for the brand, and so we first established our beachhead for the brand entirely in the world in the U.S. and we started with a division of Whole Foods. And we kind of built from there. But I will tell you that the secret to this was really good product. We went to the lengths of having our product imported from Malaysia because there was only one guy who made canister chips with that kind of quality. And I'm sure
Huh?
that's what you experienced when you first
I
tried it. This isn't a
absolutely,
Pringle. Right,
absolutely.
this isn't
Yep.
a Pringle, and, the other thing is there I was in my basement in Boulder, Colorado, with my laptop and a great connection back to Adelaide, but it was just me, and so I was doing things like scanning all the checks and getting them into the bank and things like this. And, sometimes that scanner didn't work. And yeah, that was frustrating. I can remember when we got our first $50,000 check, I'm like, we're on our way, that kind of thing. But it taught me a lot about resilience, determination, and belief.
Yeah.
Resilience meaning, people were like, what is this? Who's doing this? Come on, tell me more. But, at the same time, it was a bit of a, like very new. And so people were like curious, but also skeptical.
Mm,
And once they tried the product, that was basically it. So we kind of thought of ourselves as the Pringles of Whole Foods. So we were non GMO, gluten free, very
uh,
limited ingredient deck, all clean, all ingredients that you could actually pronounce, which is a really big deal. If you go into a Whole Foods, you'll see people on every aisle looking at the back of the label.
yeah, yeah,
And we wanted to stand up to that test. And then we had the product quality. But we were going up against a $4 billion company in Pringles. But at the same time, we really weren't. That wasn't our consumer. Our consumer was the Boulder Canyons, the kettle chips, those kind of people that were looking for something cleaner and better for them.
yeah. So if you were that lone ranger here in the US and doing all of that, yeah, I imagine discipline came into the thing. I imagine time management came into your all of those kinds of things that that said, "Steve, you're on the hook now."
Those are the kind of things that kinda go in the background. I
Yeah,
I will the things that I bring forward to those experiences where I was basically the system is you've got your brand, then you've got your broker who knows all the retailers really well, you've got the distributor that gets the product to the retailers, and then you've got the retailer. And all 3 of those, the broker, distributor, and retailer, are places where I have to influence with literally no authority.
right.
And,
So
boy, is that a challenge, but if you got a great product and you, are open to people's suggestions and don't just play one playbook, you kinda think about, "Well, how should I call on Whole Foods versus how do I call on Walmart?" Very, very different ends,
yeah,
truly the 2 ends of the consumer spectrum, if you think about it. Walmart over here, Whole Foods here, and yet we were able to appeal. So in our 2nd year, we got into 3,000 Walmarts completely out of the blue. And, when that product was successful in that environment at Walmart, I knew we had something because we were already selling in Whole Foods, and now we're selling in here for a price that's more than what Pringles would be to a consumer that might be a little bit less um, able to buy premium products than
yeah.
particularly the Whole Foods consumer. That's when we knew we had something real. But I will tell you, the thing that I remember the most was going to all these distributor shows and broker meetings across the country, lugging a sample box, a stand-up banner, some clothes, and sometimes the samples I took them with, sometimes they didn't show up when I shipped them.
Yeah.
So I can remember, I've got pictures of my carry-on bag, my banner, my samples, the whole thing in one in my backpack. And I'm just like juggling all this stuff, right? And that's what I remember as being the only guy. And I'll add one other thing to that. Every year we'd say, oh, we're going to get Steve some help.
Uh-huh.
And,
Yep.
that went on for 4 years. And every year we would agree, my Aussie partners are tremendous gentlemen and businessmen, and every year we'd come down to it, and I'd say, "Look, I can do it this another year, don't worry about it, I got it." And we
Yeah.
were having a lot of success, so I might have looked, more competent than I might have been, because the brand carried me, and then we picked some really good partners, to help us get there, the brokers and the distributors,
Yeah.
to get us there. So it was a little bit of luck and a lot of grinding it out on the road.
Well, and I also heard between the lines, you didn't say this, but between the lines, I'm thinking you're talking also about building relationships and how strong relationships help that success go along.
Credibility in the relationship thing, right? So, I've always found, that it's a fairly natural thing for me to be able to talk to people of different, backgrounds and experiences and, thought processes around, when we're in the food business. I mean, everybody's gotta eat. So it's kind of a neat business from that standpoint. It's always gonna be there.
Yeah.
Um, but I found that, really opening myself up to and saying, "Hey, here's what we got. What do you think?" And I think, when we've spoke before about salespeople talking a lot, talking over.
Right.
The classic would be is you get you're three slides in on a 8, 10 page PowerPoint deck, and the buyer says yes, and you keep going.
I still have 8 slides to go.
Hey, I'm not done. No, you're done. Close the book.
You're done.
Thank you very much. We'll follow up. Give me the new item paperwork.
Yeah. Well,
So, listening, because we get full a lot of salespeople get full of themselves, and the more if I just think if I can just talk a little more, they're gonna say yes, and it's actually the complete opposite. You wanna leave room for them to give their opinion.
well, and the other thing about the complete opposite, you talked earlier about influence without authority. And I've
Mm,
been in leadership for most of my career, leading
yes.
teams, but I also had peers I had to deal with, and so you're not the boss of them, and
No.
you're not the boss of the guy or the gal above you. So in those situations, you have to be able to, you don't have authority. So you have to be able to influence without authority. And I think sales and relationships and everything you've just been talking about teaches us that you can influence without authority and make that distinction in success.
It's
Yes?
a
No?
it's a powerful skill, and I would argue that you also had clients that you had to influence with your results of your
That's true.
consulting, right? And you
Yes.
had literally no authority. All they did was, I mean, they were not obligated to take your advice.
Right.
They might have felt like, well, we've invested in this, so let's listen to them. I'm sure they mostly took your advice for Merv. I have no doubt about that. But at the same time, it was influencing without authority, and I think that's about being authentic, being humble. People can sense that pretty quickly. It's really not about building a particular structure or anything. It's really about the people. And the biggest compliment I could get is after I finished at Good Crisp and I was trying to help some other brands get to certain brokers. Um, you know, the biggest broker on the planet for natural foods is Presence Marketing, and I had a really strong relationship with them. If I brought other brands to them, they would always say the same thing. Well, Steve, if you think it's a good one, we're going to definitely take a strong look at it.
Oh, very
And that
good.
couldn't have made me happier or proud
Yeah.
of how I built an authentic relationship with various stakeholders in that organization.
Yeah. Over the past several months, I have had a lot of guests on my podcast that also talk about emotional intelligence and in terms of from their perspective, from whatever expertise they have. And I'm sure that from a sales and leadership, I'm going to say leadership with sales,
Yeah,
I'm sure
sure.
from that perspective,
Um,
you also had to deal with or build your own emotional intelligence to be successful in your field.
I actually depended on it quite a bit. It was a big piece for me, and there were many elements to it, but I always kind of encapsulate it in having empathy.
Ah,
And empathy is your ability to put yourself in other people's shoes
yep.
and understand. And I think that was a very powerful secret weapon for me, particularly early on. I can't remember book it was. It might have been Emotional Intelligence. I can't remember, but I really got focused on that after B school and working in some diverse groups at the Coors Brewing Company up in Golden and trying to find a way to communicate to various stakeholders that have different agendas than you would have or I would have. And I think empathy is the one that really was the secret sauce for me because I could put myself in their shoes and then start to address or present my thoughts thinking about how they're hearing it or how they might uh, take it in some form or fashion. So, emotional intelligence for me, it's empathy, it's really understanding how that other person is working, and then it kind of just all falls into place from there. So I try to make it simple for myself, and I just think
Yeah.
of the word empathy.
Well, and if you think about it, I just thought of the last car I purchased from a salesperson, and he asked all the right questions to get me into the mood for how I needed to think about buying my next car. So, he displayed to me empathy, and I can see exactly what you're saying from that
That's
perspective.
really interesting. Yeah, you can see examples of it out there. And the other thing I like about it is I would then see others on my team kind of doing that and picking up on that, even though I wasn't expressing it in that particular way. They kind of took that clue and then kind of, maybe I was picking similar people, probably, but also they would then mimic some of that kind of behavior and approach when they were trying to talk to stakeholders that they had to influence without authority.
Yeah. You mentioned when we first started in your, opening, you're introducing yourself, you talked about the highs and the lows. Salespeople in my mind, and I've never been a professional salesperson, although I do wanna understand that all of us are in sales to a certain
Yes.
extent. But I imagine in some of those ups and downs, in the downside of that, I imagine you faced some rejection, some pushback. How did you deal with that, and what can the way you dealt with that help our young leaders understand how they can deal with similar situations?
Sure. Well, the first thing that I would always do to kind of rationalize a down thing, and I'll give you an example. We went into Sprouts, big natural retailer, definitely a huge target. We had already gotten into all the Whole Foods regions, so we were national with Whole Foods, and then going after Sprouts. And I got in there, and the buyer wanted to do a EDLP, Everyday Low Price program, which put me at a disadvantage to other brands in there that were pricing high and low on promos.
Oh,
And, so we were very excited about getting in there, and it was going okay. The volumes weren't great, but they weren't horrible. And after 12 months, it was gone. We got DC'd.
wow.
And, it was a tremendous, blow, and so I can still remember this. I'm sitting in a parking lot at a grocer, different retailer, and I call my partner Matt Perry all the way in Adelaide, and he knows if I'm calling him right direct, something's up. And I had to tell him right away. I just needed to get that off my chest. And he was totally he took it very well as a professional and said, "We're going to get this back, and don't worry, it's not you." And, that all the things that you want to say to make someone feel a little bit better. But
Yeah.
I think the thing for me is that the one thing I took away as a solace is, no is usually the beginning of the discussion, not the end of it. Now, getting turned down by Kroger, 4 years in a row was no every year, and, I gotta tell you, strapping the boots on, so to speak, and going back to Cincinnati year after year after year with where we were having tremendous success at everywhere else and running into buyers who had particular proclivities that I wasn't gonna be able to get over, that was really where no was the beginning of the conversation.
Uh,
And I can tell you this, when we finally got into Kroger, I took that email, I printed it out, and I taped it on the wall in my office. It was kinda like, it was like a trophy. And so, yeah, the downs are pretty down, but I always tried to balance it out with the successes we had and looking at it and saying, at least with Good Crisp, it was such a success year after year after year. It just kept building that, I could point to that, other
yeah.
successes I had and console my tender heart that I was gonna be okay and that the brand was gonna be okay and that sooner or later, I'm gonna find the right buyer at Kroger,
Yeah.
So, yeah, ups and
Well,
downs for sure.
Well, and from a young leader's perspective, you will have those ups, you will have those downs, but it's not the end of your career. It's just a way of making you more resilient.
I have to share one other story with you.
Yeah.
I was working for Nabisco Brands, and I was on a fast track. I was the youngest division manager. When you're early in your career, you're usually you can sometimes end up being the youngest of this and the youngest of that. And in about 35, that never happens anymore.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was running this.
Wait, I'm gonna turn my camera off here just a Go
You
ahead.
know,
I'm sorry.
running
Go
going down to Alabama and running a division for Nabisco Brands with about 120 people, and they were a perennial loser. And so I come out of headquarters and I'm this Northeast guy, and everybody's like, y'all. And, it's very Southern in Alabama, very charming. And go into a room with all these guys. And, they've been beaten up by other people and they've been having a series of just declining years. And I can remember being inspired. I'm not sure what by what, but somehow I got this idea as I went in there is that this is all of us together.
uh,
And so there was no finger pointing. We spent a couple days in a hotel room and we just started to, I'd say, what do you think we should do differently? If you guys had control of this thing, what would we do? What can we learn from that, and where can we go with this thing? And over 2 days, we came up with, the beginnings of a pretty solid plan. And over the next 2 years, we became the highest performing division in Nabisco's 40. There were 46 of them, and we went from the bottom to the top. So we
nice.
went from the outhouse to the penthouse, which feels a lot better than the other way around. And it was because of the power of inclusion, the power of valuing everybody's ideas. One of the things that I sensed was these guys, their ideas weren't being respected anymore.
Mm.
And there's got to be some solutions within that room. And this was 40 years ago. And that lesson stuck with me forever because it did work when we harnessed our own intellect, our own experiences, our own personal power, and turned that thing slowly around.
Well, and I like the idea that you guys got into a room together and collaborated on solutions without pointing fingers. And that's, man, having run some huge teams and sometimes you blow it, you miss a deadline, whatever. You can't sit there and beat up on each other. You have to be able to say, okay, how can we learn from this and not let it happen again?
Yeah,
So
because 'cause you're
that's
gonna restrict them. I could just see these guys when I walked into that room that day that they're like, "Oh, here comes this Yankee. What's he doing down here from headquarters? He's probably gonna fire us all." And, it was the complete opposite, and, literally within an hour, you could kinda see them, the shades, lifting or the filters coming off,
yeah.
and, it was 1 guy or 2 guys going, "Hey, we never did this, and I thought it was always a good idea," or, "Nobody listened to me when I had this idea," and then it just kinda built on itself.
Yeah.
And I'm getting chills thinking about it because it was a powerful human moment.
Well, it had to be. It stuck with you for 40 years. So,
Yeah.
and to my listening audience, that is exactly what you need to be thinking about in terms of that collaborative approach to coming out of a dire situation with successes. So,
Yes.
I
Yes.
like the fact that you went from the outhouse to the penthouse because stuff runs downhill, right?
Believe me, I've done the penthouse to the outhouse. Not as fun.
Hey, we're probably encroaching on our time, but I
Sure.
want to one of the things that you and I have always been able to do is communicate well. And I think from a young professional's perspective, along with empathy and along with a lot of the other traits that we've talked about today, I think communication has to be right up there with one of the top traits that a young professional, a young leader should learn to bring out in themselves, whether it's presenting formally or conducting meetings or just having a hallway conversation. What what would you say about communication requirements for a young leader?
Well, I think that, humility is a really big one. I think when we're young, we get kind of full of ourselves and,
Yeah,
maybe you were the youngest division manager at Nabisco or you were the youngest region manager at PepsiCo or whatever at the time. Really at the end of the day, that don't mean anything. That does not mean much.
right.
And really kind of taking the approach of, communicating with sincerity, with self-control, with thoughtfulness, maybe speaking a little bit more deliberately, not exhibiting the highs and lows, asking other people their opinions. So, what do you think we should be doing is a very powerful way for people to open up. What have you been thinking about this challenge we're having? How have you addressed this in the past? What can we learn from the experiences where you succeeded in other venues? And how can we apply this to the team here? I truly do believe it comes back to the emotional intelligence piece and also with a nice big serving of humble pie, no matter how cool you think you are and all that kind of stuff. It really comes down to how can you relate to that individual you're communicating with in any situation. So I've always found that public speaking is very comfortable for me, but that was because I had a theater background in high school and
Uh,
college, and I
yeah,
just kind of had that thing I was born with. But that doesn't always translate into a great leader, right?
that's true. That's
Because
true.
you could just be a real, you know, a person that no one wants to follow just because you're full of yourself.
Yeah.
So humility, put down the ego, communicate in a way with mostly questions and open questions, not
Oh,
like, don't you think we should do this? What do you think we should do?
yeah.
Those kind of things. And I know that's not the end all and be all, but it's certainly some of the characteristics that I probably failed at early on and then learned the lessons of how to do
Mhm,
it better.
mhm.
And over time, that evolved into something that, allowed me to partner with the Good Chris Company and these guys from Australia, and they took a bet on me. And, we had a very, very successful run that has had a huge life impact. I mean, this is not a fake background back here, by the way.
Yeah.
This is where I live. And I put a Good Crisp logo on the front of my house. It's not real big, but I call it the house that Good Crisp built.
Well,
And so go ahead.
I was looking at that and, I knew you would come on with your aloha shirt, so because I used to also live in Hawaii, I brought my aloha shirt. By the way, it still fits.
Yeah, mine too, and, that is a nice that looks very vintage, it's not something that you got at, the ABC store.
This is authentic. Yes, when
Yeah, this
Liberty House used to be still a thing.
yeah,
On
yeah,
Oahu.
well, there's a vintage, shirt place in Oahu I'm gonna have to point you to for when you next
Cool.
show up.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at that breeze behind you. Is it today, is that a Mauka breeze or a Mackay breeze?
It's Mackay, and, it's wonderful, it's the typical trade winds that we have, a little bit of, east to west, the house is perfectly set up, so we take advantage of that, not a lot of air
Very good.
conditioning. And we're having a little bit of rain today, but that's not we're having a rainy, spring, summer, a
Yeah.
little unusual, but yeah, that's not a screenshot, that's my background, my
Well,
back
and I brought that in because I still want my audience to know I can still talk the kind.
yeah, brah.
Yeah,
How's
bro.
it?
We get some grind. Hey, next time I come, we get some grinds, eh, yeah,
We'll
bro?
broke your mouth.
Yeah. All right. Hey, let's wind this down. I love to wind down with my guests with some rapid fire questions to see if we can bring
Sure.
out a little more of your personality. So, Steve Wangler, are you an early bird or a night owl?
I'm an early bird.
Me too. Love it.
A lot of get a lot done, really quiet time in the morning between 5 and 7. Even now, I'm doing stuff for my personal life and the projects that I have going on with Rotary.
Yeah. Do you know the name Blasco?
I do.
Blasco was Ozzy Osbourne's, I think, bass guitarist. So I met Blasco a little while ago, and he gets up at 4 a.m. And we asked him why, and he said because nobody else does. Interesting, huh? And
I
he's
love
a
that quiet time. It's
yeah,
my
he's
most productive, it's my most creative. I agree.
yeah,
And yet he was in a rock and roll band that you'd think could be a lot of late night guys.
yeah. Well, this was in also relation to I think Liquid Death, which is he's one of the
Oh,
marketing guys for
great
Liquid.
brand. Great
Yeah,
brand.
yeah, great brand. Hey, what's your favorite leadership quote, Steve?
I wrote a couple of down, because I wanted to make sure that I got it right, but I wanna do this because I know this gentleman,
Okay.
and I didn't wanna get it wrong. So I've met and he's passed now, but Zig Ziglar used to be a
Yeah, I've met
tremendous.
Zig Ziglar. Yeah.
Yeah, so I knew his daughter, Cindy, and her husband. They were friends of ours. And so I got to spend some time with Zig, in a very casual environment. But, he was a very powerful, motivational speaker, a true, a true icon in leadership, empathy, helping others, all that kind of stuff. And so I don't want to get it wrong. So Zig Ziglar said, you don't build a business, you build people, and they build the business.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
I really like that because, again, that gets back to the sharing of responsibility, sharing the successes, learning from our failures together. It kind of does. And I found that to be the case even today. Good Chris Company, from one guy to now about 45 people,
Mm,
$100 million in revenue going for the next 5 years to 200 million in revenue. And
nice.
I truly believe is that because my Aussie partner, Matt Perry, and myself had this belief that if we brought the right people on, they would truly build a business. Now, I know that sounds like, well, of course, but I don't think everybody thinks that way.
Yeah.
And they don't think because it's such a powerful tool to get things done. And again, back to that force multiplier thing. You don't want to carry all that weight on your shoulders forever. Sure, you can do it for a couple years, but you want to share that responsibility and also the successes. Because I can tell you, even the successes weren't as rewarding on my own, except for me and my wife, that kind of thing. And my partners back there, as opposed to having a team. And we're like, yeah,
Right.
we did this.
Yeah. I'm actually trying to get Tom Ziegler onto my podcast. So if you got,
Oh,
if you got
I
any,
don't. It was in the 80s, and
yeah.
I'm sure I lost track of Cindy and all that kind of stuff. But it's yeah.
So in fact, I'm looking at my bookshelf and I see Zig's book, See You at the Top, which reminds me, what's your favorite book, Steve?
I think, it's still good to great.
Oh yeah.
We always read, and there were a number of but just for brevity, the thing that stuck with me first was, get the right people on the right seats on the bus. And,
Oh,
for me, that was a visual I could take, being a sales guy, we like pretty pictures and we like graphs that show things like this.
yeah.
That kind of stuff. When speaking of monthly report cards, because we would get our Nielsen data or our spins data, but, really putting the right people on the bus in the right seats on the bus, meaning, if we have to shift things around a little bit, we're not talking about losing people. We're just kind of shifting some things around. Hey, maybe Bobby does something better in, food service sales and has more experience there than calling on C stores or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But I was always struck by that because it didn't mean we just needed to get rid of people because they weren't performing. It's maybe they're not in the right seat.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well,
That's
he's got a new book out about, the meaning of life, so to speak. I can't remember the title. I've just started reading it. Jim Collins. So, and I'll
yeah.
give you one more for him.
Yeah.
Great vision without great people is irrelevant.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
What a
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. Very good. Well, let me wind this down with just kind of where can people find you if they want to connect with you, Steve?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, Steve Wangler. It's not Wrangler. It's Wangler. If it was Wrangler, I wouldn't have had to do all this work for 46 years.
Yeah.
And I'm at Stephen J. Wangler at gmail.com. And I'm always happy to talk to people. I am retired. I'm pretty busy, but I'm actually very open to giving back. I have been so blessed. I've had some mentors, including some of the guys in the natural products business, Haas Hassan, Mark Retzloff, Terry Tierney, guys like that, Mo Siegel, the founder of Celestial Tea, Mark
Oh, yeah.
Retzloff, the founder of Horizon Milk, those kind of guys. And they took me under their wing early on. And so I've always been into mentoring, helping others. I've been, involved with other brands to get them to the next level. So I'm always open to that for the right opportunity to help to share some of my experiences. Maybe that'll help them out.
Very good. Well, for my listening audience, as we wind down, I think what you've just heard from Steve, and let me see if I can encapsulate this just a little bit, is that leadership isn't just about managing projects or departments or organizations or companies or whatever, but at its core, I think leadership is about earning trust, influencing people even when you don't have the authority, communicating clearly and including people in that communication, and then creating that momentum from all of those activities. Very few professions, by the way, teach those lessons faster than being in sales. And Steve certainly brought his sales experience to our leadership team today. So thank you for joining me today. For Steve, for sharing the real world lessons that emerging leaders can immediately apply in their own careers. And to my listeners, remember this: titles may open doors, but trust is what keeps them open. So until next time, lead smarter and always lead with purpose.
If today's conversation added value, make sure you subscribe. And if this episode resonated, please leave a quick review to help other leaders discover the show. And remember, leadership works best when you put people first. Let's lead with purpose, together.